Hey everyone, welcome. So today we are diving beak first into the absolutely stunning world of one of nature's most vibrant creations, the macaw. But, we're not just here to admire those incredible feathers. Nope. We are here to solve a really fascinating, long-standing mystery about a very peculiar habit they have. Okay, I want you to picture this scene. You're on a riverbank in the Amazon, and all of a sudden, it's just alive with this kaleidoscope of red, blue, and yellow as hundreds of macaws descend. But here's the weird part. They're not drinking water. They're eating dirt. Yeah, clay. This behavior, it's actually called geophagy, and it has baffled scientists for years. I mean, why would these gorgeous birds risk getting nabbed by a predator just to eat clay? What's going on here? All right, so to get to the bottom of this whole clay mystery, we first need to really understand our subject, right? What exactly is a macaw, and what makes it so different from all the other parrots out there? So at its most basic, a macaw is a type of New World parrot. And when we say New World, we mean you'll find them out in the wild all the way from Mexico down through South America. They make their homes in all kinds of places, from those super lush rainforests you're probably picturing to even more open, kind of savanna-like woodlands. Okay, let's break down the key identifiers here. What really screams macaw? First up, you can't miss those massive, powerful beaks. They are perfect for cracking open the toughest nuts. Then, of course, you've got those iconic, super long tails and that really distinctive bare patch of skin on their face. And check out their feet. They're what we call zygodactyl. That just means 2 toes point forward and 2 point back, kind of like a woodpecker's. This is what gives them that absolutely incredible grip for climbing. And you know that bare facial patch we were just talking about? Get this. It isn't just some blank patch of skin. The pattern of those teeny tiny feathers growing on it is completely unique to each individual bird. It's literally as individual as a human fingerprint. How cool is that? It's just one of those amazing little details of nature's design. So, you know what, the word macaw isn't just one thing. It actually covers this incredible range of birds with a huge diversity in size and color. So let's explore that a bit, from the absolute giants to the so-called mini macaws. In total, scientists recognize 19 species of macaw. But that number is a pretty fragile one. You see, it includes species that are critically endangered, and some that are already extinct. Birds that are just lost to us forever. And the size variation within this family is just staggering. It's absolutely wild. On one end of the spectrum, you have the magnificent hyacinth macaw. We're talking a giant, stretching over 3 feet long from beak to tail. And then on the complete opposite end, you've got these so-called mini macaw, like the red-shouldered macaw, which is often no bigger than a common parakeet. It's an incredible range. All right, now that we've got a good handle on our subjects, let's circle back to that riverbank in the Amazon. We're ready to tackle the central question. Why in the world are they eating clay? For years, there were really 2 main competing ideas about this. So the prevailing theory for a really long time was all about detoxification. The idea was that macaws eat a lot of seeds and unripe fruits that have natural toxins in them. And the clay, well, it acts kind of like a sponge, binding to those poisons and neutralizing them. And it's a neat idea, right? It makes sense. But new research points in a very, very different direction. The new evidence suggests it isn't about toxins at all. It's all about sodium. So how did scientists finally crack the case? Well, the real breakthrough came from research led by Donald Brightsmith at the Tambopata Research Center in Peru. His team did the work. They went out and they analyzed the soil from these clay licks. And what they found was that the specific clay the birds were choosing to eat didn't actually have any special toxin-absorbing properties. But you know what it did have? A much, much higher sodium content. So the conclusion was pretty much undeniable. The birds weren't there for medicine, they were there for salt. It's basically a giant natural salt lick for parrots. And you know what? The geography of the region backs this up completely. The largest clay licks, the really famous ones, are found deep in the western Amazon basin. We're talking hundreds of kilometers from the ocean. Now, near the coast, there's plenty of sodium in the environment from things like sea spray. But the further inland you go, the scarcer that vital mineral becomes. For these macaws, this clay lick, it's their only reliable source of sodium. So, okay, we've solved the mystery of the clay licks, which is fantastic. But the story of the macaw is far from over. And unfortunately, this next chapter is a really difficult one. The truth is, these magnificent birds face a deeply, deeply uncertain future. The reality here is, well, it's stark.
The famous Spix macaw, you might know it from the movie Rio, is now officially extinct in the wild. The glaucous macaw and the Cuban red macaw, they're just gone forever. And beyond these complete extinctions, the hard truth is that the majority of the remaining macaw species are considered endangered. So what's driving all this? Well, this visual kind of breaks down the two biggest threats. By far, the greatest problem is the rapid rate of deforestation, just the straight-up loss of their forest homes. But the illegal trapping of these beautiful birds for the pet trade is also a huge factor. And it's a really complex one, too, because it's often tangled up with the livelihoods of local communities, which makes it incredibly difficult to stop. Thankfully, there are major efforts to protect them. The primary tool we have is a big international agreement known as CITES. Its entire purpose really is to make sure that the international trade in wild animals and plants doesn't threaten their actual survival. And this is kind of how it works in practice. For the most endangered species, like the beautiful scarlet macaw, they're placed on what's called Appendix 1. That effectively bans all commercial trade, period. Other species that are maybe a little less vulnerable but still at risk are on Appendix 2. Which just means any trade is very, very tightly controlled and monitored. It's a really critical line of defense for these birds. So what a journey, right? We've gone from a curious little mystery on a riverbank to the harsh realities of conservation. Macaws are so much more than just beautiful birds. They are vital, incredibly intelligent parts of our world's ecosystems. But their existence is just so fragile, and it leaves us with one final, really crucial question. What will it take to make sure these flying rainbows don't just fade from our world forever?
You know, when you think of a tropical rainforest, chances are this is the bird you picture. A macaw, right? With those spectacular, vibrant feathers, they're basically the living jewels of the Americas. But there is so much more to them than just being beautiful. So let's dive into the brilliant world of the macaw. Okay, let's kick things off with a little puzzle. Take a good look at this bird's face. See that bare white patch? Well, the pattern of feathers right there is so unique, it's basically a fingerprint. Yeah, a personal ID for a bird. And what that means? Well, we're going to get to that in just a bit. All right, here's what we've got lined up. First, we'll figure out what actually makes a macaw a macaw. Then we'll look at all the different kinds out there. We're also going to solve a pretty cool mystery about why they eat clay. After that, we'll touch on the serious threats they're facing, and finally, we'll wrap up with their long, kind of complicated history with humankind. So let's jump right in. What is a macaw, really? I mean, what makes it different from all the other parrots out there? Turns out, it's way more than just being big and colorful. Okay, so the official definition. Macaws are a group of parrots from what's called the Arini tribe, and you'll only find them in the Americas. We're talking Central and South America, even a bit of Mexico. And yeah, you can't miss them with those super long tails and, of course, those famously bright colors. All right, let's break down the key features. They've got these huge, powerful beaks for cracking nuts, those classic long tails, and that light-colored facial patch we talked about. And here's where we answer that first mystery. The tiny feather patterns on that patch, they're totally unique to each bird. Just like our fingerprints. How cool is that? Oh, and they also have these special feet called zygodactyl feet. That's 2 toes forward, 2 toes back. It gives them an amazing grip for climbing around. So when we say macaw, we're not just talking about one kind of bird. Not at all. This family is incredibly diverse, with a massive range when it comes to size and color. And this table really drives that point home. I mean, look at the difference. You've got the hyacinth macaw, which is the absolute giant of the macaw world. And then on the total opposite end, there's the little red-shouldered macaw, which is barely bigger than a parakeet. And then you see the Spix's macaw, famously known as the Little Blue, but its status is extinct in the wild. It's a heartbreaking story, and that contrast really sets the stage for the conservation issues we're going to get into. Okay, now for something really fascinating, a genuine mystery from the natural world. In parts of the Amazon, hundreds of macaws get together to do something, well, kind of weird. They eat dirt. Yep, clay. And for the longest time, scientists were scratching their heads trying to figure out why. I mean, can you just imagine seeing this? A huge riverbank, just completely covered in this kaleidoscope of colorful parrots, and they're all just eating the dirt. It's an amazing sight. They call it a clay lick. So what's the deal? Why on earth are they doing this? So for years, the main idea, theory number one, was that the clay acted like a detox. It would neutralize all the nasty toxins from the seeds and unripe fruits they eat. But then a new discovery pointed to a much simpler and honestly, a more compelling answer: salt. And here's how they cracked the case. First, studies showed that the specific clay these birds were eating, well, it wasn't actually very good at absorbing toxins. So, scratch that theory. But that same clay had way higher levels of sodium. And think about it, sodium is crucial for life, but deep in the western Amazon, hundreds of miles from any ocean, it's super hard to find. The biggest clay licks, they're all far inland. So the birds aren't detoxing, they're just using the riverbank like a giant natural salt shaker. All right, as much as we love learning about these incredible birds, we have to talk about something more serious. Because in our modern world, their story has a really dark side. That vibrant rainbow of macaws, well, it's starting to fade. 19. That's the number of known macaw species. But here's the really tough part. Out of those 19, a shocking number of them are in serious trouble. Most are endangered, some we think are already gone for good, and others, like the Spix macaw we just mentioned, are now completely gone from the wild. So what's causing this? Well, it really boils down to two huge threats. First, rapid deforestation. Their homes, the forests and woodlands, are just disappearing. And second, the illegal pet trade. People are trapping them for their beauty. It's simple, really. As their homes vanish, so do they. Now, the good news is, there are efforts to protect them. Every single macaw species is regulated by something called CITES. That stands for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. It's basically a global agreement that controls, and in some cases, completely bans, the trade of these birds. It's a critical tool in the fight against the illegal trafficking that's putting them at risk. You know, our relationship with macaws, it's not a new thing. It goes back way, way before the modern pet trade. Humans have been fascinated by these birds for centuries, and it's a history that's both incredible and, well, pretty complicated. I mean, think about this. Long before Europeans ever set foot in the Americas, ancient civilizations like the Inca and the Nazca held macaws in incredibly high regard. Those amazing feathers were like currency. They were traded across huge distances and used to create stunning textiles and ceremonial outfits. So yeah, our fascination with them is definitely not new. And that really brings us to the final and maybe the most important question. You know, from ancient worship to modern-day threats, our story and their story have always been linked. So as their world keeps getting smaller and smaller because of us, we really have to ask, what is our role in their story now? What part are we going to play in what happens next? Are we going to be the generation that just stands by and watches this rainbow fade away for good? All right, let's talk about the macaw. You know, when you picture one, you probably see that flash of brilliant color, the huge beak, and you can almost hear that loud squawk, right? It's the poster child for tropical birds. But that iconic image, well, it's just the cover of a much, much deeper story. We really think we know this bird, but there is so much more going on when you actually look a little closer. And get this, for a starting point, just let that sink in for a second. The pattern of feathers on a macaw's face is totally its own, a unique identifier, just like your fingerprint. We're not just talking about a species here, we're talking about a world of individuals. That one fact kind of changes everything, doesn't it? It totally sets the stage for everything else we're about to uncover. So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at what biologically makes a macaw a macaw. Then, we'll dive into the incredible diversity in the macaw family. It's wild. After that, we're going to play detective and solve a pretty cool scientific puzzle about their behavior. And finally, we'll take a look at the complicated, long-standing relationship between macaws and us. Okay, section 1. More than a pretty face. Before we get into all the mysteries and the conservation stuff, we've got to get the fundamentals down. What are the key traits that actually define these New World parrots? So what really makes a macaw a macaw? Well, a few key things set them apart from other parrots. You've got those famously huge, powerful beaks, of course, their incredibly long tails, and those bare, light-colored facial patches we just mentioned, the ones with the fingerprints. But what's really cool are their feet. They're zygodactyl. What a great word, right? It just means 2 toes point forward and 2 point backward. It's the perfect design for gripping branches and handling food. And where do these guys live? Well, their home turf stretches all the way from Central and South America up into Mexico. They also used to live in the Caribbean, but sadly, not anymore. And they are super adaptable. They do great in all kinds of places, from dense rainforests to open woodlands and even savannas. All right, let's move on and build on that. Welcome to the macaw family tree. You might be surprised to hear that macaw isn't exactly a one-size-fits-all kind of term. This family has some serious diversity. So how many are we talking about? Scientists have identified 19 distinct species. Now that number tells a whole story. It's a mix of the ones still with us, the ones that are critically endangered, and tragically, a few that are already gone. And this just shows you the incredible range we're talking about. On one end of the spectrum, you have the magnificent hyacinth macaw. It's the largest flying parrot in the world. And then all the way on the other end, you have the red-shouldered macaw, a so-called mini macaw that's really no bigger than some parakeets you might see. The difference is just staggering. To keep all this diversity straight, scientists organize these 19 species into 6 main buckets called genera. You might have heard of names like Ara, that's for the big macaws, or Anodorhynchus for the blue macaws. It's just the framework they use to make sense of this big, complicated family. Okay, now for what might be my favorite part, a real-life scientific puzzle. Section 3, Solving the Clay Lick Mystery. For years, scientists and anyone watching these birds were just stumped by this really dramatic, really strange behavior. And this is the million-dollar question. Why would hundreds of macaws, and other parrots too, fly down to these exposed riverbanks almost every day to eat dirt? I mean, it seems totally backwards. What could they possibly be getting out of it? For a long, long time, there were 2 main ideas. The first was that the clay worked like a natural detox, neutralizing toxins from the seeds and unripe fruit they eat. Kind of makes sense, right? Like a natural antacid. The second theory was that they needed the extra calcium from the dirt to make healthy eggs. Both of those seem pretty plausible. But when researchers, especially the team at the Tambopata Research Center in Peru, really started digging into the data, they found that neither of those theories really held water. The real story was something else entirely. And here it is, the big reveal. The reason for this whole behavior, which is called geophagy, by the way, is a hunt for sodium. That's it, salt. It's an absolutely vital nutrient that is incredibly hard to find in the Amazon basin, which is hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the ocean, the main source of salt on the planet. And the evidence for this is just so compelling. Studies show the macaws weren't picking the clay that was best at absorbing toxins. No, they were specifically targeting the patches with the most sodium. And you find the biggest clay licks in the western Amazon, the area that's furthest from the ocean. It all just picks into place. They're on a quest for salt. Mystery solved. So that brings us to our final section, where we're going to zoom out and look at the macaw's place in our world. Section 4, a fragile relationship. The story of macaws, it turns out, is deeply, deeply intertwined with our own, and it goes back for centuries. Our fascination with these birds is nothing new. Back in the pre-Columbian era, cultures like the Inca and Nazca absolutely revered macaw feathers. They used them in incredible textiles and ceremonies. The moment Europeans showed up in the New World, macaws started appearing in their maps and their art. But today, that fascination has taken a much darker turn, as these birds face the double whammy of massive deforestation and the illegal pet trade. And the reality today is pretty stark. The majority of those 19 macaw species we talked about earlier are now endangered in their natural homes. Their vibrant populations are under an absolutely immense amount of pressure. So what are we doing about it? Well, there's a huge international agreement called CITES. That stands for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species. Its whole reason for being is to regulate the global trade of wild animals and plants to make sure that trade doesn't threaten their very survival. So let's break down what that actually means. A species like the famous scarlet macaw is listed under Appendix I. That means all commercial trade is completely banned. It's the highest level of protection you can get. Meanwhile, a less threatened species, like that tiny red-shouldered macaw, is in Appendix II. That means trade is still possible, but it is very, very strictly controlled. But for some species, these protections just came too late. The Spix macaw is now extinct in the wild. The glaucous macaw hasn't been reliably seen in decades. And the Cuban red macaw, it's just gone forever. These aren't just names on a list. They're stories that have ended. So we've gone on quite a journey, haven't we? We started by seeing the macaw as an individual with its own unique fingerprint. We explored its huge family tree, solved a long-standing mystery about its behavior, and finally faced its fragile relationship with us. It's pretty clear the macaw is so much more than just a beautiful bird. And all of that leaves us with one final, and I think crucial question. Now that we know about their unique identities, their intelligence, and their profound fragility, what is it going to take from us to make sure that these winged rainbows actually have a future in our world?